Good morning, everybody, and welcome back from break as we continue the annual MIT CIO Symposium. Our next event is the CIO keynote panel. My name is Vipul Bhushan. I'm a risk management professional in the financial service industry. I have the honor of introducing Peter Burris, an analyst at Forrester Research. And we're going to be having a panel discussion on leading the digital enterprise. It's a fantastic topic. I hope you enjoy the next hour and 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Vipul. It is a great honor to be here. My name is Peter Burris. I'm, as Vipul said, an analyst, and I help drive our CIO research at Forrester Research. Very quickly, Forrester, for those of you who don't know, is a company that is very focused on helping individuals create business value through technology. My specific audience is I serve CIOs and help them improve or utilize technology and process and other things to improve the way that their companies operate. Digital business means a lot to Forrester. We talk about something that we call the age of the customer. And in the age of the customer, the basic proposition is that as customers gain market power, companies are going to have to reinvent themselves to better serve them, to win them through technology and other approaches, as well as to retain them over a period of time. And that notion of reinvention is crucial because increasingly our data shows very strongly that customers are starting to exhibit a preference for engaging brands digitally. So in the most simple way, the idea is that over time, as companies reinvent themselves, they're going to have to find more ways to utilize the technologies that customers are familiar with, that customers want to utilize, wherever those customers may be, because it's becoming an increasingly mobile world, and that this notion of digital reinvention and digital enterprise is going to be crucial to the future of competition, but perhaps even more importantly, crucial to the way that businesses serve the needs of their customers, both business as well as consumer customers. Now, I'm joined by a great panel today, so what I'd like to do is introduce each of them. I'll invite them out here, and then after they all sit, I'll ask them all to introduce themselves. So, Andy.
Hi, Peter.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Brian. Rebecca. And finally, Roger. We're all on a first-name basis. So what I'd like each of you to do, starting with Andy and moving over to, I guess, stage right. Andy, who are you?
Well, first of all, I want to say that the collective intelligence of this panel is the highest of any of prior panels, right? So let us start. So who am I? First of all, thank you, Peter. I am the global CIO of Dell. Dell is today what we call the world's largest startup. As many of you know, we went private in late October, and we're now the world's largest end-to-end solutions providing company. Many people think of us as a hardware company, but we actually software services and provide solutions. I've been the CIO for the last 2.5 years, and I'm in charge of everything from a IT perspective, running the company in the bimodal, the infrastructure, back-end application development, all the traditional things, but also in working on the digital enterprise for Dell.
Thank you, Andy. Brian?
My name's Brian Lilly, Global CIO for Equinix. I've been at Equinix since 2008, so about 6 years, and it felt like a startup, still sort of feels like a startup. We're a couple billion in revenue. We have 100 data centers around the world. And sort of what our secret sauce is we are a carrier-neutral global colocation provider. So really, it's the on-ramp to the cloud. We have over 500 cloud providers that sit within Equinix, and it's really where cloud and mobile and the networks are all coming together. My background and what I'm responsible for is I have both the classical IT, which is all the internal IT, infrastructure, apps, all that, but also product development for externally facing software, API development. So we recently launched Cloud Exchange, which is an API exchange which connects enterprises to clouds, and that was one of my team's products. Very happy to be here.
Excellent. Rebecca?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Rhodes. I'm the president of our Global Business Services Group at Raytheon and our Chief Information Security Officer. I'll just share a little bit with you about Raytheon. We're a technology company. We serve the aerospace and defense industry clearly, but one thing that you may not realize is that while a $24 billion company, we have about 63,000 employees. Over half of the employees are engineers, scientists, and technologists. So the discussions today are very near and dear to our heart and very, very close to what we talk about on our leadership team. 30% of our revenues are international, and so we serve customers, actually nations and allies around the world. We either serve or operate in over 80 countries worldwide. So my responsibilities are to run our Enterprise Services Group, which is the Global Business Services, also as our Chief Information Officer, and in addition chair our Pension Investment Committee and am the champion for our diversity and inclusion initiatives and projects company-wide. So I think one of the things we all have in common is that it is a CIO plus role. When I stepped into the role as our CIO in 2001, I primarily was responsible for all things IT, both in the businesses and at the enterprise and corporate level. And over the years, as we reinvented IT and we transformed the company, that role continued to expand and grow, with the most recent and most dramatic expansion was the merge of IT and our enterprise services last year. And the power of that is incredible. And I think it's a trend that we're seeing in a lot of industries and a lot of companies. And a lot of it has to do with the synergy that we've been talking about all morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Roger Gurnani. I'm with Verizon. I think many of you know Verizon Communications. We provide global IP networks. We provide broadband, wireless, and fiber optic networks. We also provide a lot of technology solutions, both to consumers as well as enterprises. We manage something like 125 million consumer relationships and about 150,000 enterprise and government relationships around the world. So as you can imagine, IT is heavily involved in taking care of those customers, and I'm sure through the panel this morning we'll talk about digital enterprise, how digital technology is changing the game not only in our industry, but industry after industry in terms of companies now really have to compete digitally to win customers and win in the marketplace. So look forward to the discussion this morning.
Excellent. So the discussion is going to be very open. We have two microphones out front. I'll have questions. I know each of you have questions yourselves. If you have questions, let's start it right off. Feel free to come on down to the microphone. The basic notion here is that we've just heard some phenomenal information from some of the leading thinkers in the world on on the topic of digital enterprise. We have here captains of industry that are responsible in their roles for both bringing or creating or bringing that vision to life within their businesses, but also to help and participate, as we've heard from multiple of you, for translating that vision into new goods and services for markets. So why don't we start here? It's hard to get into a lot of prescriptions for how digital enterprise is going to be transformed and the role that the CIO is going to take unless we have a baseline for understanding what digital enterprise is. So Andy, why don't you kick us off? What do we think digital enterprise is?
So digital enterprise, the way we think about it is, now that and you've done a lot of work, Peter, with Forrester, talking about the customer is at the center of everything we do. Winning the customer, keeping the customer, getting that loyalty, et cetera. Data and information is sort of the new currency in this digital world that's actually going to help us have the insights so that we can market to, sell to, hear from, change our product, offerings, et cetera, based on what we know. The only way to get those insights is to embrace digital technologies that are going to enable you to be that digital enterprise. So if you think about, in the 70s, we were doing business process automations, and that sort of started, and then you kind of moved into e-commerce, and e-commerce and the internet, the internet was a disruptor, e-commerce was the next thing. This digital enterprise is beyond that now. It's the biggest disruption we've had ever from a technology perspective, and taking the tools from the digital disruptive technologies and using them to gain the insights and have personalized conversations, tailoring, marketing intent, et cetera. And when we talk about those tools, it's not just the typical SMAC, social mobile analytics cloud. It's nanobots, it's wearables, it's ingestibles, it's all of those things that are actually gonna help us have that intimate conversation and be able to market, sell, build, fulfill, and all the things that we need to do with the customer at the center of the enterprise. That says that companies need to think very differently on how the operating model across process, technology, people, and communications.
So Brian, your company's at the center in many respects of this heightened need for a great deal of bandwidth and a lot of processing capacity to take advantage of this. What types of constraints do you see the CIO facing over the next few years as the business seeks to become more digital?
Well, first of all, Andy, that was awesome description. That was awesome.
Thanks.
I'm glad you went first.
I asked Peter behind the curtain what he
that's
thought it was.
fantastic. So we see the constraints. So let me just describe briefly what we're seeing happening. We're seeing not only cloud computing really creating tight bonds with the NSPs and the network service providers to solve problems, but we're also seeing them start to push data out to the edge, to the very edge of the network, and that could even be cell towers. So the constraints that we see and that what we're helping enterprises with, in particular enterprises who are thinking through this strategy, is how do you, if the data that you're trying to collect, that Andy was talking about, let's say from machines, Internet of Things, if you're out in whatever part of the world and you don't have a way to collect that efficiently and bring that back into the processing engine that you need, that you have, that's one constraint we see. And so they're coming to us and they're saying, how do I architect my network? And we use partners like Verizon. How do I architect my network to put these collectors wherever they need to be to collect this data? That's one constraint. The second constraint we see is, everybody talks about hybrid cloud, but it's real, is if I have enormous data sets, and these are enormous data sets, and I'm trying to move them from cloud to cloud, and those clouds are over bandwidth that's insufficient, we're seeing sort of a data gravity happening where they're saying, hey, we want to offer a way for private enterprise to connect directly to the cloud. We're seeing it with Amazon Web Services. They pioneered with us the Direct Connect. We're seeing it now with Azure, with Microsoft. And I think you're going to continue to see it with the large cloud providers saying, hey, we want to be that compute and even storage infrastructure for you, a fiber drop away. And so those are the big constraints that we're seeing our enterprise customers and prospects come to us with.
So thank you, Brian. That's great description of what's happening in the back end. Rebecca, in many respects, Raytheon is one of those companies that's at the vanguard of thinking about where information needs to flow under especially difficult and challenging circumstances. What types of, how is Raytheon working with their customers to make sure that data can flow wherever it needs to be, whenever it needs to be in response to whatever conditions someone's facing?
Right, so I think one way to answer that, and I thought Andy did a great job of talking about what the digital business is from that, with the customer front and center. Mm-hmm. The other piece of that you're hitting on for us is all about, and in our industry, most of the time, our customer intimacy and how we meet the needs of our customers are to collaborate with them and actually develop solutions that usually don't exist yet. So as a technology company and an engineering company, we're all about bringing all of our capabilities enterprise-wide to bear and bringing it forward to develop a new capability or a new solution to a set of requirements that so far don't necessarily have a product or system out there that can accomplish those requirements. And so when we think about information flow and when we think about digitizing the business, we think about it in terms of satisfying that customer need. So for us, it goes back to the same fundamentals. We have our platform, an enterprise-wide platform with infrastructure, systems. You think through your standards, your technologies. You think about your information flow. And for us, it means having information flow in a way that we can collaborate around the world with various customers and customer communities, but at the same time protecting their national interests. So we have to have a very sophisticated compartmentalization of information as well. And my guess is that that's something that most companies in various industries will start to think about as they align with and partner with companies and countries and around the world. But that has been a big factor in how we thought about digitizing our enterprise. We have the customer front and center. We also have to think about how we develop the solutions and bring our knit together the entire company end to end. And then the third piece, of course, is how do we deliver through that environment? And we've looked at some different innovative ideas around how we operate and deliver from the back office. So we kind of see all three of those areas, and they all play together in developing new solutions and new products.
So we've heard something about what digital enterprise is, the constraints in the back end, the opportunities, especially through co-creation in the front end. Roger, Verizon has so many different tentacles and so many different things as we talk about digital, and so many challenges as you try to move from a company that simply provides bandwidth to a company that's providing higher value services to a broad array of communities. How are you playing a role in helping guide Verizon through the challenges of inside as well as outside digitization?
So you know, my role entails a lot of piece parts. So obviously we do all the IT work that's required to digitize the corporation, to make sure we're engaging our customers via digital means. You know, over the last few years, our interactions have become predominantly digital. Over 80% of the way we interact with customers today are through digital means. But there's another wave of opportunities and trend that's taking hold, which you alluded to, which is customer empowerment. You know, what's happened is customers today are very comfortable with technology. I'm talking about consumers. And not only are they comfortable, they're quite savvy with using technology as well. They're always connected via their smartphones, tablets. They have access to vast amounts of information. They also have a stronger voice in terms of, you know, they're collaborating with other consumers through product reviews, customer forums. So this requires a completely different engagement model for businesses. And this is not only true for us, it's true for lots and lots of businesses, industry after industry. And so we tend to think of how do we solve these challenges, not only for Verizon, but then how can we take those learnings and apply it for other businesses as well? And that's what creates opportunities. So to give you a couple of quick examples, you know, customers, for the most part today, engage with us through our channels, the way we've constructed them, our websites, our e-commerce, our portals, you know, our collaboration tools, et cetera. But the next wave of innovation is really looking at customer immersive channels where we engage with the customers the way they want to live their lives, right? So for example, last holiday season, a lot of people bought electronics, you know, smartphones, gaming consoles, tablets. And then when they brought these devices to their home, our broadband networks, our FiOS service recognized that there are new devices in the home. So that was an opportunity for us to help the customers connect their devices, bring them online, and as well as make smart recommendations in terms of, hey, with all the devices and all your increased needs for bandwidth, how would you like to upgrade to FiOS Quantum? And you could do that right on the TV with one click on your remote, or if you happen to be using your smartphone or tablet, do it with one click. And we literally, immersed ourselves into the experience, natural experience lives of our customers. That's the new immersive customer engagement model that we're seeing. And I'm sure you are seeing that as well through
Very
your
much so.
research. Yep.
Question from the floor.
So my name is James Davis. I run a small business architecture firm that really integrates and talks a lot with the C-levels. And as you're really expressing your digitalization and your movements that you're dealing with today, number one question I get back when talked in that nature is security. Is it a due diligence or is it a barrier that we're constantly having to get around? And how, as you're letting data go out, right, from SaaS models and so forth, where do you draw the line? What's the type of data that you'll be able to let go in those type of scenarios? And if you can, just give me an idea of how can I get past that problem with the C-levels I'm talking with? What technique was used to get past that with you guys?
So I'll start with that, and I'm sure Rebecca and the team have more to say. Look, digital enterprise information management, EIM, becomes critical, and at the heart of, you have to have a strategy for it, and that includes a strategy. So when you say, is it a barrier or is it I can't remember the word. Right, it can be both, but it should be neither. You should have a strategy toward it. By industry, it varies, right? Healthcare industry, HIPAA laws, you're gonna have a difference in what you let out in, et cetera. I'm sure in Raytheon's case, the same thing in business. You have to have that strategy, and I'll go back to something a panelist said earlier, you can't be fear-based, right? You have to be bold, but you have to have a proactive, defined strategy, not a let me go try it, or things leak out of the organization because the digital enterprise organization or traditional IT organization doesn't have a plan. Right,
Andy,
and people are all
Andy,
using
you said
SaaS.
it earlier, data is the new currency, right?
Data is the new currency. That's what it is.
I would also add to that as you observe the CIO Plus role, a big part of our role is facilitating the right kind of discussions around risk management. And while we're not the risk managers, we become a critical and essential component of just about every discussion around risk, whether it's because of disruptive technologies or capability gaps, doesn't matter. You find yourself engaged in that discussion and at the table each and every time. And I think that's where you get beyond the fear piece. And most companies, if you don't already have, you absolutely have got to have a comprehensive strategy in terms of what your processes, your business model, your information flow, and from that you design in the security and the approach that you as a company need to take to manage that risk. And depending on your business model, you may find that there are some areas where you can be very flexible in terms of knowledge flow and information flow and data flow, and other areas where you have to be very precise, very constrained, very controlled, and some of that's driven by regulatory requirements, right?
If I can add a couple of additional points, I agree with what's been said so far. So we publish a report every year. It's called a data breach investigation report. We work with many agencies around the world, as well as literally hundreds, a couple of thousand customers on really analyzing these data breaches that occur. Here are some facts. The fact is we live in a digitally charged, super connected society today.
And going to get more so.
And going to get more so. Not only humans are connected with lots of data, and we do all our banking and investments and everything through digital technologies. But now the machines are also getting connected, increasingly connected cars or planes or missiles, Rebecca, all digitally connected. So this opens up the world to a lot of things. So yeah, technology plays a critical role in protecting our assets and our information and our customers, but it's also human beings. The humans have to play a big role. So one of the things we clearly see as we analyze all these incidents around the world is that human element. Like, vast majority of the breaches that take place, the technology safeguards were there, but it's the humans and the human processes around those that had a breach, really. So it's got to take that overall approach where we as technologists can provide that role in making sure everybody understands that security is everyone's job.
And it's been that way for probably 30, 40 years since the Orange Book was published about system security. Brian, what do you have to add to that?
Well, so first of all, strategy, people. I mean, when I was in the Air Force, the issues were almost always human issues. But sort of part of the good news is that I live in Silicon Valley. There's a significant number, sure, probably like here, of startups that are really focused on this security set of issues. And really very capable solutions to things like, for example, cloud. I think the question I would ask your CIO clients or prospects is, do you know what cloud services your employees are accessing? How do you know? What tools and technologies? How do you know what their risk score is, as Rebecca said, for that? So I would encourage you, there's small startups, one called Sky High Networks, as an example, that actually does a risk score across almost 40 attributes by cloud service. So it just came out of Stealth a year ago. Those are the kinds of companies that are coming to give information and allow you to take action. And so that's one. There's a significant number of others. But I think having...
like Forrester Research, I might add.
Oh, yeah, I've heard they're good. But this is a technology, not research. Yeah, this is a technology.
All right, so no more questions for you, Brian.
Okay.
So let me add one thing. This is a very important point. I think we're going to come back to this under the guise of multiple things when we talk about the idea of digital assets, when we talk about privacy. Very, very important. I'll add one thing to it. I spend my days mainly talking to CIOs, and I've seen an interesting little bit flip. I was with a group of around 8 or 9 CIOs actually in Denver, and there was a CIO of a sizable retailer had flown in, and we're specifically talking about the conversation you have with CXOs, others of your peers. And 2 things I'd note. First of all, that the verb targeted has now entered the CIO lexicon, to be targeted, as in target. And then secondly, that for the first time this one CIO said that he had gone to his board, and instead of saying, we're secure, we're really close, how much you want to play, how much do you want to spend, he said, we've already been breached, we just don't know it. And that is a totally different way of thinking about the problem. Instead of saying, we can protect everything, it's saying, look, we know we're porous, we know there's going to be shared, we know there's going to be access, what are we going to do about it? Right. And I think that the conversation now needs to become more, what are we going to do about it? In addition to continuing the conversation about how to stop it, but what are we going to do about it becomes a more important feature of the CIO conversation. Anybody disagree with that?
No, absolutely. In fact, a comprehensive strategy today includes, and every business model needs to think it through, because their approach will be different, but you've got to think through your strategy in terms of protecting yourself, your strategy in terms of protecting your products. That might even involve like anti-tamper type technologies. And then how are you thinking about protecting your customers? And then once you've thought that through, you have to look at your environment and realize that the most determined attacker will get in. And so while you want to have layered defenses and good defensive capabilities, the inevitability of them coming in, you've got to figure out, now what do? You better have good breach monitoring and breach management capabilities, and that is a market need that's not answered yet. out there.
So Rebecca, we don't have to worry about these missiles being controlled by the
Hey,
bad guys.
careful. We're talking, no.
We protect our products.
So I'll
right.
add one more thing, and I'm going to take a question here. 15 years ago, one of the things that CIOs were asked to do was to draw up business continuity plans, and then to come up with literally almost scripts for practicing them. Are you guys being asked to draw up security continuity plans and then as well organization-wide scripts for practicing better security? And especially in light of the inevitable breach that everybody's going to face. Brian?
We take security very, very seriously. We're viewed as a very safe place to put digital assets. And so we have an entire strategy baked around it. The CISO reports to me. I also said you should dotted line report to the audit committee. We brief the board once a quarter. We have an entire incident response, is what we call it, just a global incident response plan. And so when you say scripts, we actually play out scenarios with runtime movements of data and people and all that kind of stuff, not just business continuity, but around security. We want to beef that up, actually. And your comment earlier where you say it's no longer just a conversation about how you invest, I think that was just spot on. The conversation we're having is not necessarily that we've been breached, but that we've been investing this over the last 6 years. How secure do we feel? Well, you don't know what you don't know. And so this whole concept about already being breached, the conversation is now saying, okay, what is the next layer? What is our incident response? How can the business engage and help? So it's actually a pretty pithy conversation and good conversation, and it's healthy, and it's about risk management, because you're not going to stop everything.
And it's
if
not
you're
just
targeted.
it's not just a technology conversation.
It's not.
An entire
It's
business
not.
conversation. Sir.
Good morning.
Thank you, guys.
Good question.
We talk a lot about technology being transformative in our business. We talk about the impact it has on our culture, on our industry. As all of you are respected leaders and have reached, kind of pinnacle positions in where you're at today, how would you describe the personal transformation that has occurred with you in your career, and how has that enabled you to be a better leader? So what are those personal things that you realize you've reached a plateau, you were challenged, and what is it that you had to give up or start doing that allowed you to succeed further in your careers?
I can start. I mean, as with anything, life is learning, right? So, you can either stay stuck in certain paradigms and say, this has always worked for me. A title of one of my favorite books is What Got You Here May Not Get You There, right? And the title says it all. So you can either get stuck in your paradigms of this is how technology's always worked, this is how security's always worked, it's always worked that way, and this too shall pass, digital isn't really, or you can really open your eyes, realize what's going on in the consumer space, which is driving a lot of the digital disruption in what we're doing, and again, the technologies, as we said earlier, and embrace it. So the biggest learning for me, and it sounds very, very trite, but it is so true, is you embrace change and you also make change happen. So I learned to embrace it first and learn, educate, from educators, professionals, reading, myself, teams, et cetera. But then you also learn that you want to start creating and making change and disrupting so that you can be more of an innovator out there. I also stopped asking people as a CIO what they wanted. One of my favorite sayings is, Henry Ford, if he would have gone out and asked people, what do you need? They'd say faster horses, right? Well, we stopped asking. We do sort of ask still, but we start thinking and futuring. Imagine a world where, or looking at other industries and saying, wow, the world there's a parallel here, and how do we do it? So it's that sense of embracing change was a pedantic step, and then really starting to drive and create change using all the disruptive things around was kind of the aha.
I'm going to come back to that, Andy, but is anybody else?
Yeah, so, throughout my career, I've worked in a technology role in many different functions. I've not only been in IT, I've been in engineering, product development. I've even had the opportunity to run our sales, marketing, and have P&L responsibility in the business. So that's really given me a very broad perspective. But as I look at the last 30 some odd years that I've worked, the pace of change with technology and digitization that we've been talking about is only accelerating. And the roles that humans play in businesses and institutions is changing as well at the same pace. And for me, it's been very interesting because myself and my team within the technology organization, as well as other functions within the business, the way we tackle our business challenges or strategies and how we leverage technology, all that mindset has to change as well. My view is, as somebody in one of the panels earlier said, the whole world is getting programmable. So you talk about big data and analytics and customer insights, and a lot of decision making is really being done by the customers. I think that's so true. So what do humans do in that type of a world? And my view is that human touch, that empathy, collaboration, and making sure that human touch still exists. So that's what we talk about, and that's what we try to get closer to our customers, our employees, because our employees are going through the same transformation as well. They want to have information readily available. They want mobile tools. They want to be always connected. They want to have a say in the big decisions the corporations are making. So it's kind of a very interesting change on the human side that's also occurring as we talk about the digital side.
Well, Rebecca, how about you? Personal journey that's...
Yeah, well, you're going to hear a theme. We're either leading transformation or we're a catalyst for transformation, right? And I would say the greatest professional growth for me, and it goes back to Andy's comment about what gets you here may not get you there, in selling concepts, in really influential communications, I went into the job assuming that the best way to influence and drive change was to refine and complete the answer. And what I learned was that the 90-page PowerPoint deck, if I were to take that and try to drive change or drive transformation with all of those answers and everything buttoned up, the leadership meeting or the board meeting would turn into a design review. What I learned was, and I'd watch my peers, and they'd be selling concepts, often running next steps. We're going to overhaul supply chain. We're going to do this. And they were doing it with what, from my perspective, new to the job, felt like it was half-baked. Well, what I learned was you align around the outcome. You align and share a vision. You align as leaders around the possibility. And usually you can do that with one page. Then, through transformation leadership and change leadership, everyone is engaged. Their fingerprints and thumbprints are all over the clay. And now you also have this great army, this great team of people who will actually take that idea and that vision further and come up with even better solutions than maybe what you would have envisioned the night before.
Brian?
It's a very good question. It's a hard question. I think these are great points of view.
You've had 5 minutes to think about it, though.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah, but
and make
your
sure
answer's got to be the best one.
and make sure you mention Forrester along the way.
so it was an epiphany when I read this Forrester report. It was awesome. It was an epiphany. Actually, truth be told, I was lucky, and I give a lot of glory to the guy upstairs. I've had amazing mentors along the way. Moving from the Air Force, I have a math undergraduate degree, and my first master's degree was in telecom. And the reason I did it was because all of a sudden I was a commander of a comm squadron, and I didn't know what a plesiochronous circuit was, because we were sending RS-422 signals to satellites. So I took a master's degree at night, and I came back in the evening, and I sat on the knock floor, and I pulled cables and hooked up crypto and got taught by my troops. So that was a pretty defining moment, because I just, I appreciated the work they did. And then my first role, when I decided to not go to the Pentagon and get out and went to Silicon Graphics, I had some great mentors and some defining projects that, I mean, Rebecca's comments about being able to take highly technically complex information and simply tell a story is critical. I mean, I think if that's pretty much the skill that it takes in this aligning around outcomes. I went to Switzerland, got to work there for a couple years, and I was always infrastructure. And then all of a sudden I got an opportunity to come back, and my mentor said this. He was a CIO. He says, you want to be a CIO? He goes, there's a lot of boxes that a CIO has to manage. He goes, try and manage every one of them. Best advice I ever got. Steve O'Connor, he's now the CIO of AAA. He was my mentor over there. And I said, well, I haven't done apps yet. So I came back and I did apps, and that just, you know, it was one of those things where they said, it's an Oracle, it's 10.7, character-based, it's baked, don't worry. And then the CIO left, the CFO said, we're doing a transformation, 11i. And it was brand new 11i, 900 patches later, and almost a lost marriage, and a lot of sleeping under the desk. That was transformational. And then I'd say the final transformation thing that really taught me about business was I had just finished, I had been 3 years at VeriSign as VP of IT, and I thought I wanted to change the vowel from CIO to CEO. That's what I had a crazy thought. And I got into Stanford Business School, the Sloan program, as a matter of fact. And when I went there and did the strategy and learned about business, when I came back, I took business jobs, but what I realized is what I really loved was bringing technology to bear to solve real business and to actually get these communities to collaborate and talk. And so I think that's sort of the journey, I would say, but I would say a lot of luck and a lot of gifts.
So let me summarize, and then I want to raise one point with Andy, but just to make sure we get to it, and then I'll go to another question. So summarize, and I think that this is a reflection of what I'm hearing from CIOs generally. You move from positioning yourself as the chief technology problem solver to the chief technology storyteller, where you set a vision, you articulate for the corporation what is possible. Of course, you have to at the same time sustain trust that you're competent and you're going to lead an organization that at the end of the day is either up or down, but that becomes an increasingly crucial part of the job.
Peter, if I can add a point to what you just said, we do technology not just to do technology. We do technology to have an impact in, with our customers, impact with our employees, with society at large. Technology is now so pervasive. And what I have learned through my career is doing technology, getting the technology project done is challenging enough, but creating that impact and outcome requires a lot of people side of the equation, right? And so myself, my team, what I would say over the last several years, that's where we have grown as well, is how do you create the impact, the outcome? And that requires changing out, touching thousands and thousands of people side of the equation.
Yeah, so Andy, I want to note that one of the things that, as Andy said, Dell is the world's biggest startup in an extremely dynamic and complex and difficult industry right now.
I have 100,000 people that question everything the CIO does. So
and
they run technology, so they can, right?
yeah, this is, don't want your job, no question about it.
Good.
What I was going to say is you've also, one of the challenges that CIOs face, and I presume all of you have been through this transformation yourselves, is that it used to be that the technology organization was very comfortable being the high priests and priestesses. And by the way, notice the diversity of this panel?
Yeah.
There are, congratulations on MIT for bringing, we got two incredibly competent and accomplished women here. That's wonderful. Anyway, so the point I was gonna make was that you have been, all of us have to at some point in time realize that we are no longer our job is not just the technology and to keep everybody out of the technology sector. That increasingly we have to recognize that notion of a global other, the business. I like the pogo, the little pogo cartoon.
Yeah, yeah.
We've met the business and he is us. I presume that all of you have at some point in time made that realization that you are not the folks who are keeping business out of technology, but the folks that are bringing technology to the business as business people.
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly right, Peter. Technology is ubiquitous. We've heard that phrase. I actually ran what Brian talked about sky high earlier. If you want to, as CIOs, if you want to do something sobering, because some CIOs intellectually think, I understand it's ubiquitous. I understand, there's shadow out there. And I've actually gone on record as saying I'm a CIO that does not chase shadow. I chase innovation so that there's no need for shadow, right? But if you want a sobering thing, go run and see how much SaaS product you actually have in the environment. How much, of the boxes, I'll call them for the sake of not giving, any particular company latitude here. How much has been downloaded, how many mobile apps, and all the rest. It is very sobering, and that's where the intellectual thought of, yes, it's ubiquitous, and I realize, our employees internally are out doing things, et cetera, really comes to hard facts. We ran it and we saw it. So what we did is instead of starting to shut down and drive out, we said, how do we secure? How do we embrace? How do we get good contracts with? And we created a mobile app store to boot. And we said, we see all the mobile apps, send them to us, we'll secure them, and then we've got a store called the Dell.com mobile app store that all our employees can use. Bring them in. It's a completely different mindset, right, to kind of what you're doing. But it's a consumerization effect.
Yeah.
It's all out there. How can you expect employees to go home, if you think about it internally, and who are customers as well as employees, and you've got external customers, and they have a life of grabbing, getting, downloading, living, being able to provide insights. They're social, they're mobile. By the way, they can do their own analytics too, right? And then, they go out, they influence product, et cetera, and yet when they come into work, you expect them to forget all of that and go brain dead, right? It doesn't work. So we absolutely have changed our mindset.
From the floor.
Hi. So you've been touching on this peripherally. So the issue that I'm seeing in organizations is the people, the staff. You're talking about all this great new technology and implementing it. People have to do it. And you have a mix, and I'm wondering if you experience this. And how you address it. You have a mix of people, some new young graduates really on top of the new technology, people who've been there some time, who may even have grown up from the mainframe world, and some people who are willing to move into new technology, some people who aren't. You've got old systems that you have to maintain, new systems you're trying to create. Do you see it? How do you address it? How do you address the human factor in making all this happen?
Yeah, this human factor is not only just in IT, which you described very well. The human factor is also in the business, right? You've got different generations of employees, and they have different expectations. Just to give you a quick example that comes to mind, we have about 35,000 technicians that work in the field. They drive around trucks and they install and maintain our networks and go to customers' locations to install our products and services. The last 2-3 years, they have gone through massive transformation where we have telematics in their trucks, so we know all kinds of information. They carry around ruggedized tablets. They have lots of information. And the transformation, I would characterize it as this field force has gone from being field technicians to now becoming, customer sales and service consultants. Yep. When the customer's home, they can demo our products, services. They can make changes to the customers, give them much more personalized, customized service, make changes to their order, get them to sign, the order. If there's a problem, they can troubleshoot, test. All these things in the past required them to make a phone call. But now, what we've seen through this transformation is customer